Good evening. I'm Karen Taylor. I am Programme Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. And I'm delighted to welcome both our in-person and our online audience to tonight's programme, Rural County, Urban Borough, A History of Queens, with architect Laura Heim on this beautiful spring evening. Tonight, fittingly, also marks the first of our spring lecture season. You will find details of future talks on your seat. I want to express our thanks to our partner for tonight's talk, the New York Landmarks Conservancy, and to welcome their members as well as our own members and regular attendees, and a special greeting to new audience members. And if I've left anyone out, my apologies. I also want to thank Gregory Dietrich for suggesting tonight's talk. It just so happens that we have the book Rural County, Urban Borough, History of Queens for sale tonight. And you will be able to purchase a copy of this book from Amy at the front of the room. There's Amy over there. And I'm sure that Laura will be delighted to sign it for you. The book is also available online through Rutgers University Press website. We have another special window display to celebrate tonight's program by Thomas Donoghue, who is our artistic window curator, which I encourage you all to look at before you leave this evening. So thank you for that, Thomas, and you'll find the window on the west side of the entrance as you exit. For those of you who might be less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York is a non-profit organization that was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of the city. Today, our 241-year-old organization continues to serve and improve the quality of life for the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, currently in session upstairs, the General Society Library, of course, of where tonight's talk is taking place, the John M. Mossman Locke Museum, and that is upstairs for those of you who want to, in person, who want to visit it afterwards. It's just up there. And finally, our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of which tonight's lecture is part of. Laura Heim is an award-winning architect with a firm in historic Sunnyside Gardens, Queens. Her firm, Laura Heim Architect, has a particular expertise in historic preservation and adaptive reuse and renovation. She has served as the chair of architecture on the steering committee of the Sunnyside Gardens Preservation Alliance, as president of the AIA Queens chapter, and on the board of directors of AIA New York State. She was the co-chair of the AIA-NY Fellows Committee in 2023. Currently, she's on the board of the Historic Districts Council. She frequently collaborated on the historic preservation work with her late husband, Jeffrey Kroessler, the author of Rural County, Urban Borough. And I'm so pleased to introduce Laura Heim to you this evening.
Hi, I'm pleased to be here to present Jeffrey Kroessler's life work, Rural County, Urban Borough, A History of Queens. My thanks to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen for sponsoring this event in partnership with the New York Landmarks Conservancy. It is an honor to present in this dramatic and historic library under the beautifully restored skylight. I would specifically like to thank Karen Taylor, Program Director, and Victoria Dengel, Executive Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen for inviting me, and Gregory Dietrichs for suggesting it. I've been so pleased to see in the past months that there is so much interest in the history of Queens. I'm glad this presentation is also virtual so that it will reach a wide audience. Jeff and I enjoyed attending many lectures here over the years, and we're of course supportive of the mission of both the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen and the Landmarks Conservancy, so it's an honor to present here. Jeffrey Kroessler was the foremost expert on the history and preservation of his beloved borough of Queens. I will begin with a brief introduction to his work and advocacy. Jeffrey, who was my husband, unexpectedly passed in the winter of 2023. He was a champion of preservation in New York City. He was a historian, preservationist, brilliant author, librarian, and educator. With his training as an academic historian, he uniquely promoted the recognition of everyday spaces and neighborhoods, which were historic and worthy of note. He was a devoted educator. His career culminated in the position of professor and interim chief librarian at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, CUNY. He truly enjoyed guiding students to resources and knowledge. As an author, he wrote numerous articles, papers, and editorials on history and preservation. His significant publications are included here. You can clearly see an emphasis on history, urban history, New York City history, and then, of course, the history of Queens. His last book, published posthumously June 10th, 2025, is the one we'll discuss this evening. So the book is published. Where did it start? As early as 1987, Jeffrey was quoted in the New York Times championing the heritage of Queens. The historic heritage of Queens is denigrated because it doesn't have H.H. Richardson and Louis Sullivan. What it has are builders. This is a borough of homes and factories. There's nothing glamorous about that, but there's something historic and unique. That's Jeffrey, quoted by David Dunlap in the New York Times, "Queens cultivates its heritage." At that time, he was working on his dissertation at the CUNY Graduate School, Building Queens, the Urbanization of New York's Largest Borough. He studied under Richard C. Wade, the soul of urban liberalism, and benefited greatly from the work of Vincent Seyfried, a historian of Long Island who wrote volumes on Queens, Long Island, and the Long Island Railroad. The core of the book owes much to his dissertation, but interestingly, one of the readers, Joshua Freeman, suggested it start earlier with the Dutch and the English. And the second reader, Stephen Petrus, encouraged him to bring it past the 1939 World's Fair into the present. Jeff readily embraced these ideas. Thus, to quote Andrew Dolkart, "Finally, a complete, comprehensive history of the physical and social evolution of the borough of Queens." Having grown up in Garden City, Long Island, and studied urban history in Manhattan, and having lived in Forest Hills, Astoria, and finally with me in historic Sunnyside Gardens, Jeffrey was uniquely positioned to create this history of place in between, Queens. My role was to shepherd the book through the publication process with the very enthusiastic Rutgers University Press. I'm so grateful to them. I learned the steps involved in creating an academic book: preparation, first submission, second submission, production, final proof, and finally publication. The process of creating a book is similar in ways to creating a building, which I'm much more familiar with as an architect. You create, you submit, you get comments and review, and then again until you reach the final proof, where only corrections can be made if required, no content or structural changes. Dedicated and talented editors contributed, with special thanks to Peter Mikulis, executive editor of Rutgers University Press, for so encouraging publication. While the manuscript was complete, the images still had to be selected and placed within the text. As per Jeff's initial proposal for the book, image sources relied heavily on Queens sources. The extensive collections of the Queensboro Public Library, as well as the LaGuardia and Wagner Archive, provided many images. They are both incredible research sources for the history of Queens. Many other institutions contributed as well. So many individuals assisted in this process. From finding the original manuscript on the server, which was open because he was actually working on it at that moment, to the verifying sources for chart data, to editing text and images, numerous colleagues and professionals assisted. Jeff's colleagues were outstanding in answering questions I had about the process. Librarians and archivists at numerous institutions lent their expertise. CUNY's Office for Advancement of Research assisted with the funds for the indexer. Jeff's colleagues at John Jay College were always supportive of his research. 2 photographs were generally contributed by David Dunlap and Joel Sternfeld. So I'm going to tell a little story. The photo from David was an interesting research story. I was searching for a photo of the tent of tomorrow in disrepair online. That's from the World's Fair. And I found an article he wrote in the Times in 2008 titled, "In the Tent of Tomorrow, a Faded Map of Yesteryear." I randomly emailed him to see about using the photograph in the article for this book. He promptly replied, which surprised me, that I could pay the Times to use the photo, or he could send me one he took that day. He sent the photo and the permissions, as well as the article I showed earlier, quoting Jeff from 1987. He included a lovely note about what a trailblazer Jeff was in preserving everyday spaces in Queens. There were many meaningful moments in this process of completing this book. This history is made accessible and compelling by the clear structure of the book, as is arranged in chapters which follow a basic chronological timeline. You can see the first major division, rural, urban. Within those sections, the major drivers of change within the period are highlighted and explained in depth. Throughout the text, this history is rooted in place. For many, Queens is just where you go to get the airport, to get a plane, or where all in the family's Archie Bunker lived. But there's so much more to the story. Beginning with the Dutch, this book tracks the amazing development of Queens from a rural county to the current diverse and bustling urban borough. So let's get our bearings. I always like to start with a map of Queens, because people think they know Queens, but they can't geographically place it. Here's an outline in red, dashed line, that shows where Queens actually is. Note all the patches of green areas within it. You can see the green Flushing Meadow Corona Park in the center at the north end, as well as numerous other parks and cemeteries. The Van Wyck Expressway creates the major north-south artery, basically connecting the airports, LaGuardia to the north and JFK to the south of the borough. Queens is bounded by Long Island, Nassau County to the east, and Manhattan and Brooklyn to the west. Grand Central Parkway, Northern Boulevard, Queens Boulevard, Belt Parkway, and of course 495, the Long Island Expressway, slice east-west. Within that framework of transportation, you find that Queens today is made up of many distinct neighborhoods with their own character and ever-evolving history. Neighborhoods are a key defining feature of Queens. In Queens, even your address links you to your neighborhood, not just the borough of Queens. You live in Sunnyside, Forest Hills, not Brooklyn, as a generic name for the place you live. These neighborhoods are a unique and charming feature of Queens. Many do not realize that Queens was originally Queens County and included Nassau County, which split off during the process of consolidation of Queens into New York City. This 1859 map shows the original extent with the red outline, the current borough of Queens, and all of the area that's in color to the right is Nassau, which was part of Queens County. The chart shows the tremendous increase in population over a 70-year span, primarily in what would become the borough of Queens, with growth less dramatic in Nassau in that same period. In 1898, through the elaborately detailed political battle, consolidation was completed, with Queens becoming a borough of the city of New York and Nassau County returned to Long Island. Queens wanted more infrastructure and development, given its rapid growth, and Nassau County wanted to remain part of Long Island. These county years were very bucolic and rural. Farms dotted the landscape as Queens provided produce to Manhattan. From the 18th into the 20th century, a defining industry in Queens, particularly in Flushing, was the nursery business. The 1850 census lists many gardeners, nurserymen, and laborers in Flushing. For example, Robert E. Parsons, a horticulturalist. Samuel Bound Parsons, Jr. became the superintendent of parks in the city of New York and worked closely with the famous landscape architect Calvert Vaux, and was responsible for much of the planting of Central Park at the turn of the century. The Parsons Nursery remained active until 1906, when the city acquired the property for Casino Park, where exotic 100-year-old specimens still stand in stately rows. See lower left image, which I took last year. Little by little, in the early 1900s, commercial buildings began dotting the farmland. With rapid rate of growth, often buildings were cookie-cutter and repetitive, as you see throughout Queens. The building and the landscape became the fabric. But let's go back to the land. Long Island is defined by the Great Terminal Moraine, which is the southern limit of the glacier that covered North America in the last ice age. The ridge creates a boundary between Flushing on the north and Jamaica to the south. Southern Queens looked to Brooklyn for markets and a gateway to Manhattan, and Flushing sought direct communication to Manhattan by water. Thus, those two important places in the development of Queens initially developed very independently. One of the most unusual, now lost features was the Hempstead Plain, shown in the bottom image, a unique prairie, and the only tall grass prairie east of the Appalachians. The English set up a racetrack there in the late 1600s, and it was later purchased by A.T. Stewart to make Garden City, Long Island. Queens has a deep history of religious tolerance, dating back to the Dutch and the English in the 1600s. The 1640 charter for the original Dutch colony decreed that only the Reformed Church be practiced but other religions were tolerated. When Peter Stuyvesant took over as general director of New Netherland, he made it his mission to uphold the status of the Reformed Church and suppress all religious dissent. John Bound's house, shown here at the top right, exists today in Flushing. The actual house and some of its furnishings exist today as a marker of this time. He allowed the Quakers to use his home for their meetings. He was banished from the country, later to win his return. We presented the book last fall twice in Flushing and took a tour of the Bound house. I highly recommend it. I had never done it. I highly recommend it. This sense of religious tolerance exists today in Queens with the diversity of its inhabitants. The book deals with the history of the various railroads traveling through Queens extensively, their locations, mergers, failures, and impact on subsequent development, with the Long Island Railroad finally becoming profitable and stable. The railroad was initially created to send produce to Manhattan and manure back to Queens for fertilizer. It then expanded to provide access to housing and entertainment. With transportation options expanding, there came new settlement patterns. The merchant elite set up mansions along the East River as summer homes accessed by ferries, which lasted only a short period. The railroad led to expanding railroad suburb development, with large tracts of land now easily accessible and laid out in vast grids. In Victorian time, Queens became the home to Knox's Industries, as industrialists needed inexpensive land outside Manhattan to expand their factories and wanted to take advantage of looser regulations. They created industrial villages. Here you see the village of College Point in 1876 on the top. It's with the still standing Poppenhusen Institute in the center with the mansard roof. Conrad Poppenhusen made his fortune in hard rubber and created this village for his workers. This building still exists as well, and its recent preservation efforts are being honored by the Landmarks Conservancy this spring at the Lucy G. Moses Preservation Award ceremony. Please consider attending. Below, you will see the Steinway Piano Factory, founded by Henry Steinway. His son William moved production to Astoria in the 1870s and also created a working community. These large tracts of open land were also ideal for horse racing, which had been continuous in Queens, first found in the Hempstead Plain, established by the English in 1665. Other racetracks followed, but it was in the 1800s that the sport attracted large crowds, as shown here in this classic print. Also during Victorian times, Queens became a place to play and relax and escape the dense urban fabric of Manhattan. With trains now providing better access, people flocked to the south for the beaches. Wealthier families stayed in hotels like Arvern, by the sea, while middle-class families rented small wooden bungalows, like the Rockaway bungalows. To the north, North Beach Park, now LaGuardia Airport, was created by Steinway to provide enjoyment for the workers of his factory. And in Middle Village, Queens, across from the Lutheran Cemetery, you could find Niederstein's, a German restaurant and hotel. We celebrated Jeff's father's 80th birthday at Niederstein's. It was sadly demolished in 2007. The Queensboro Bridge was a direct result of the consolidation of Queens into the greater New York City. It was completed in 1909. When it opened, it was the fourth longest bridge in the world. The new bridge dramatically impacted the increase in population of Queens. The bridge had been a topic since at least 1836, with Queens agitating for it repeatedly. And now, at last, they had a two-level double cantilever bridge directly connecting Manhattan to Queens. Any discussion of Queens would be remiss without mentioning the vast opportunity for housing experiments and types throughout the 20th century. Here you can see several examples outlined in red on the western edge of Queens. Given the open land from the nurseries and farms, and the increased transportation access with the Queensboro Bridge, trains, and the subway lines, the time was ripe. The borough was booming. First came experiments inspired by the Garden City movement in England with Forest Hills Gardens, 1909, which aimed to provide more attractive suburban housing model without the endless repetitive grid. Winding streets with integrated landscape designed by the Olmsted brothers created a picturesque residential setting. And the West Side Tennis Club, home to the US Open up until 1977, when it was moved to Flushing Meadow Corona Park, provided a place to enjoy and have recreation. Alongside this experimental housing, repetitive blocks of housing continued to sprout across the borough. And then, 1924, work began on Sunnyside Gardens, which can be seen here under construction on the then vast empty land adjacent to the Long Island Railroad tracks and easily accessible by the subway to Manhattan. Today, if you fly into LaGuardia or out of LaGuardia, if you're on the right side of the plane and at the window and look down, you can clearly see Sunnyside. I do it every time I can. It's a green oasis in a sea of dense urban fabric. I thought I would go a bit more into detail about Sunnyside Gardens, as Jeff also wrote an extensive book on this planned community. I assisted by providing diagrams and illustrations created by my architectural office. It gave us a chance to collaborate a bit prior to my role in this book, where I had to select all the images.
What year is that book?
2021. I live in Sunnyside Gardens and conveniently walk to work, as my architecture studio is located a block away from the house. I've completed 40 projects in my neighborhood, all of those little red dots, which demonstrate a high level of community trust. Jeff and I were partners in preservation as we worked successfully to have the neighborhood designated a historic district in 2006 and 2007. As with Forest Hills, Sunnyside Gardens embodies the Garden City movement ideals that originated in England. Housing reformers' goals were to combat the social ills of crowded, unhealthy urban areas with a new model of garden suburb housing. Emphasis was on open space, scale, and landscape. You can see here, starting with the old law tenement laws, as laws were passed, they reduced the building footprint and increased the basic light and air as a given right to all New York residents. Sunnyside Gardens went a way step further and dramatically increased the land-to-built form ratio, as you can see in the center. That's a site plan of a Sunnyside Gardens block as opposed to the urban blocks typically around it. The core design feature is the courts and the muses. Here you can see a prototypical court layout. So in Sunnyside Gardens, we have these courts, and we all identify with the courts. I'm in Washington Court, there's Hamilton Court, Jefferson Court. So you have this whole idea of your neighborhood is identified, and in this diagram, the green is the shared space. There's an easement. They're not all intact now, but in the concept, that was a shared space. And your personal space is the light green. And in each of the blocks, there's a mix. The light gray is a single family, the medium gray is a two-family, and the dark gray is a three-family. So you have renters and homeowners at different scales of families living in the same neighborhood, and it was designed originally to be affordable housing. The porches are in red. They're a very important feature because the goal was to have everyone enjoy the garden. So on the single-family houses, the porches are typically in the front, and you share the entry to it with your neighbors, so you have to, I share shoveling the snow with my neighbor because we share the same walkway to get up to our house. So you have all these little community building elements that are put into the design of the neighborhood. And in the back, the two families have the porch, and that allows the second floor apartment to have a terrace to also be able to enjoy the garden. And the three families are set back, and they have the alleyways that cut through the block. So if you park your car on the other side, it's really easy to get back around to your house. And they have the porch and terrace also for the apartment on the second floor. So this is what the house was like. I'm going to talk a little bit about my practice there, just to give you an idea, because it was related to the work with Jeffrey. And protecting, restoring these charming streetscapes and 100-year-old houses has been a focus of my office for 20 years. I will illustrate two types of projects to give you an idea how they can be preserved and modernized for contemporary use: a one-family renovation and a two-family conversion. Over the course of time, we have also restored almost 24 front and rear porches, which contributes so much to the charm of the streetscape. So this is a typical one family from 1924. You can imagine this won't cut it today for contemporary life. The rooms were compartmentalized. The kitchen was very isolated from the dining and the living room. That living room actually still looks like most of our living rooms. I even have the picture rail, which is a great amenity. And of course, all the fixtures have to be replaced. So a typical one-family house is 17'6" wide. It's very small. Priority is given to the garden. It's a very small house, but it's perfect. It has a living room in the front, the porch, the living room, a kitchen and dining in the back, and 3 bedrooms on the second floor. If you can call one of them a bedroom, I don't really think it is. It's like a closet, but people use it as a library or a nursery. And when you do work, the typical thing people want is to open up the kitchen and dining room. That's the classic. And our houses are unique because the joists run to the center of the house. The center wall in the house is bearing. So it's very easy to take out the walls. They're not bearing at all. So a classic one, this is actually my next door neighbor. And they bought the house. The kitchen wasn't the original, but it was compartmentalized. And so we opened it up and created a peninsula. And then on the second floor, there's still 3 bedrooms. We reconfigured storage and added new fixtures for the bathroom. That's a very typical one-family project. But inside, see, our neighborhood's protected on the outside, and by the Landmarks Commission. Inside, it's not. So it's very interesting. There's a very humble architecture, and it creates a sense of community. We're all very similar. We're tied together by these 2-story brick buildings that wrap the courts. But inside, anything goes. I mean, and it's so fascinating when you live there to go into everybody's houses because you have the exact same house and everybody's done it very differently. This one was very open and contemporary. We have the sliding French doors, which Landmarks allows you to do, to go out to the garden. And it's very, bright and poppy. But of course, now they have 2 kids and it's very childproof, so it doesn't look like this anymore. And the pictures on the right are what it was before. You can see it's dark, it has old fixtures, you need to upgrade it. And then I was very pleased when I first opened the office, one of my projects was actually featured in the New York Times. The only thing is they didn't give me a credit. So the other kind of typical project is a 2-family conversion. So people think the houses are small. I came from a Manhattan apartment. I thought our house was huge, but they are small. They are small. And if you have a growing family, you want more space, especially if you're coming from a different background. So people buy the 2 families and they want them converted, which is 2 apartments, one on each floor, and they want them converted into a single family. This project was actually it was my first large project when I opened my office 20 years ago. The client was a lawyer. She found me through because I was getting the first permits from Landmarks for smaller projects, so she knew I could get the permits. So she hired me. We're still friends today, actually. So basically what you do is you take the first floor, you open up, because it has a living room, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen and bathroom. You open it up and make one large living room in the front. Again, you try to connect the kitchen and the dining room in the rear with a peninsula. We squeezed in a little powder room on the ground floor. And then upstairs it has 3 bedrooms, a master bedroom with its own bathroom, and different storage configurations, ample storage. So here you can see the before. You know, it's old fixtures. This is what you typically encounter, old fixtures. And a lot of the porches have been enclosed. You know, people wanted a room, small house. They made it a room. I don't know what you do in there, but they made it a room. And you can see on the bottom where it has the living room, that's the wall where behind that wall is the stair that goes up to the second floor for the apartment upstairs. So typically you open that up, you allow the stair to flow into the living room. You can create a very open ground floor so you can literally see through the house back to the garden, and then you restore the porch, which to me is an amazing amenity, the porch. It provides an airlock for the house. It provides a place where you can look out and see your neighbors. You can sit there and have a cup of coffee. I put my plants there in the winter. It's just a lovely, lovely space. And then, of course, there's other upgrades to finishes to make it more contemporary. So this is an example of a porch that was restored. In 1940, the city of New York took tax photos of every property in the city, and now they're all digitized, so it's very easy to find them. When I opened, you had to get them, but it's very easy now. You can download any of them. And if you go with the tax photo to Landmarks, you can fairly easily get a staff permit to do the porch if you replicate it. So in this case, you can see we clearly tried to replicate the porch. We put the door back where the window had been put in, infilled in the door, and Marvin makes windows that are almost identical, except they're very insulated and thermal, which is great, so that you're not freezing in your porch, because the glazing was single pane in the original porches. And when this was going on, the contractor put up an 8-foot-high plywood fence, because he wanted to put all his garbage in the front. And this was the first big project in Sunnyside after we became a district. And becoming a district was way more contentious than it had any right to be. So the neighborhood was a little, edgy about what's going on behind that fence, because it was up for a while, this fence, and this was the first big project. When the fence came down, the client was like a rock star. Everybody was taking pictures. They were like so amazed that this could happen. And I think it has helped make it continue. It's very incremental. That's what Landmarks does. It's very incremental, but every time a porch gets done, the neighborhood is improved. So now, that was a little sidestep, but now let's go back to the timeline. The Great Depression, the historical timeline, 1929 to 39, paused all these garden suburb experiments. In fact, many in Sunnyside lost their homes to mortgage foreclosures. But it gave way to the New Deal housing efforts. An example shown here, Boulevard Gardens in Woodside, which is right adjacent to Sunnyside. I can walk to this, actually. FDR established the Public Works Emergency Housing Corporation with the Public Works Administration. The housing division of the PWA created loans for limited dividend corporations to invest in new housing, construction. In the case of Boulevard Gardens, the housing division signed a loan for the work, and the work was completed in 2 years. Can you imagine if we could do that today? Public housing experiments continued, with NYCHA submitting plans to PWA for Queensbridge houses, a successful large-scale public housing project designed to house the working poor along the East River just north of the Queensboro Bridge. The New Deal also created an expansive public works program, 1933 to 39, to combat the Depression. In New York City, Mayor Fiorelli, a friend of FDR, and the Parks Commissioner Robert Moses worked together to use the New Deal to the city's advantage. Moses played a central role in this time in transforming the Queens landscape for better or worse. The New Deal made possible the Triborough Bridge, as well as Reese State Park. Another set of projects focused on the New York World's Fair, as Robert Moses could justify new roads for access, as well as transform the area from a dump into a majestic park. The 1939 World's Fair focused on the future, the world of tomorrow. were the futuristic exhibition buildings for GM and Ford, but it also pointed to a charming suburban future that would be realized in the post-war decades. While controversial, Moses certainly had vision. Post-war Queens also sprouted planned communities more modern and durable, such as Glen Oaks Village. Built for veterans in 1947, it provided 2,900 two-story units. Also, garden apartments such as Fresh Meadows and Parkway Village, home to the United Nations employees, including their diplomats. As employees of the UN, they came from all parts of the world and were all different races. This enclave apart was essential. Embarrassingly, they faced racial barriers in securing housing in many neighborhoods. But many found the place with its international makeup very inspiring. I've had people in these talks tell me they lived there and that it was a wonderful place, actually. And later, Rochdale Village, known primarily for its social values, as it was planned to be integrated and inexpensive. Rochdale Village was, in 1963, the largest cooperative apartment complex in the world. The demographics of Queens began to change dramatically from 1950 to 2020. All in the Family with Archie Bunker's home, as shown here in the credits, went on the air in 1971 and ran for 12 years. It recorded an ordinary working man negotiating this changing social landscape. The book acknowledges the changing demographics of the borough as it transitioned from 96% white to 23% white. A driving force was the change in immigration laws with the passage of the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, which significantly altered American demographics by shifting immigration sources away from predominantly European areas towards Asia and Latin America. Of course, in Queens, with the convenient location of the international airports, that was a factor as well. The book is infused with the history of place, and of course, with Jeffrey Kroessler as the author, the importance of preservation is addressed. In the concluding chapter, with praise given to all those local authors who wrote with care about their neighborhoods. He also mentions some structures that have been lost and some that have been saved. Here's the Tent of Tomorrow, that's David Dunlap's photo, which while enduring years of neglect has finally been stabilized. The dramatic demographic shift in Queens created renewed vibrancy and sense of place. You can see in the chart how rapidly the foreign-born population increased in the borough relative to other parts of the city. While the inhabitants changed, the pride in its neighborhoods remained. While Queens is the most diverse place on the planet, let's hope in the coming years the unique sense of place can still be maintained. Read the book and hop on the 7 train to discover Queens. Thank you.
Laura, thank you. That was absolutely terrific. And I feel like I hardly know Queens at all, and I'm ashamed of that. So anyway, you've certainly inspired my interest, and I'm sure of many other people here tonight. We'd like to take some questions now, and also to remind the online audience, if you would submit your question to Meg, she will then forward the questions to me. Have we someone to start? Okay.
This is kind of a little question, but I noticed at least twice in your talk you referred to Flushing Meadow Park, singular. I always think of it as Flushing Meadow, not Flushing Meadows. When did that transition take place?
I am not going to know the answer to that question. Jeffrey? I don't know, actually, sorry.
But you've noticed?
Yes, yes.
Anybody else bothered by meadows, plural?
Okay, we started with the hardest question. Can we get easier?
Does anyone here know the answer? Do you, sir?
Just Google
Okay.
it.
Did you? No. Okay. Well, then I'll move on to your question. Well, I'm sure we'll find out.
I'll find
sometime.
out.
Okay.
You better believe it. Next
Okay.
talk, I'll mention it.
Okay.
Could you discuss some of the consolidation of the various towns in Queens into the borough? Should I repeat that?
Yeah, repeat it.
If you could
Repeat it.
discuss how the consolidation of the various little towns and hamlets of Queens into the borough of Queens, how did that play out?
Okay, well, it was very controversial. It wasn't a united front. They each had their own little concepts of what would be good and bad, because Long Island City wanted it the most. The closer you were to Manhattan, the more you wanted the money for the development. The denser you were, the more you wanted the money in general. And Nassau County didn't care at all. I mean, they were suburban. They didn't really need all this other infrastructure. And I think Long Islanders wanted to stay Long Islanders. I don't think they even wanted to be part of New York City. I mean, that divide still kind of exists. So I think in terms of the backroom politics, you'd have to read the book. It is very well researched and very well detailed, but they all had their fiefdoms and they all had their political interests in trying to do it. But they were able to gather enough support to make it happen. And that was part of the reason Queens boomed, frankly, because they got the money. They didn't have the resources to do it prior to that.
Who had the vision for creating the garden cities? Who was the person who spearheaded the development of Queens? Was there one person in particular? Were there few people? How did it work?
Well, Lewis Mumford was a very famous theorist who was part of it. And then, of course, there was the whole Regional Planning Association that was instrumental in figuring out how to fund it and create a corporation, the city corporation, to make it go forward. There were architects that were very interested. It was an amazing time. I mean, I kind of wish we could replicate it now. But everybody's a little too concerned about their money, so I just think it's harder now. But they were all just very interested theorists, architects, and planners and philanthropists that wanted to make a new way of life. I mean, it's amazing, and they did it, and they did it, and they did it over, Sunnyside is over a 4-year period. It wasn't all at once. I always say it's an architect's dream to do that job because they built 2 blocks and then stopped, and they could evaluate it, and then they tweaked it, and then they built 2 more blocks. So it looks like it's one big planned community, but it was done over time so they could keep critiquing it. And then it led to Radburn. So it was more like a whole period of research, and all these interested parties were contributing. And then the Depression happened, and that was that. And it never, and now land's so expensive, it's very hard to do it. You have to realize the land was very cheap then. So it was easy to try to motivate this. But I also think the spirit of the people was different. I think people really they wanted to see how else we could live.
I will take some more in-person questions, but I actually have a few online questions, so I'll go with them. This is from Mina online. Your husband cites his mentors. Who did he mentor? Who are the current scholars of Queens?
I think Jeff was very unique in his appreciation of Queens for his time period. He didn't really mentor anyone else specifically that I know of in the history of Queens, but he was incredibly generous with students and colleagues across the board. I found this, so he was mentoring. I don't know if it was like a specific Queens expert mentoring, but I found this even more so doing the book because so many people would tell me how much Jeff helped them and how much they appreciated his intellectual insight. He was such a fighter for preservation, and it came up all the time. Anytime I wanted help with something, everyone was there. I mean, I can't tell you how unusual it was, and it's not just because he was my husband. He must have been, and he loved the library. He loved this. He was on the reference desk. He would say, it's like he was a lifeguard when he was younger. He would say it's like being on the big chair. You had to guide what's going on. And if I called him when he was on the big chair, he'd be like, Laura, you can't talk to me, I'm on the chair. He took it so seriously, but he really helped He really liked helping the students, and that his job at John Jay was perfect for that because he would be on the chair, the reference desk for 2 hours, and then he could do everything else. He could write, he could go to his preservation meetings. I mean, it was a really great setup for him, and he was very appreciated. I mean, the outpouring was amazing.
Well, he does sound the most remarkable man. This was a question from Mark online, and can you kindly show again Jeffrey's book covers? Is that awkward for you to get back
No,
to
that
that?
happened in another one. Let's
He
see.
would like to take a screenshot.
Yeah, that happened in another talk. No, it's my retirement. Sell the books. I'm joking. Totally joking. If it's over $100, it's amazing.
Okay. Well, there you go, Mark. Just for you. You can take a screenshot of this. Okay, I'm going to ask another online question, and then I will take some more in person. Were developments like Glen Oaks Village for veterans, were they integrated? That's from Elizabeth online.
I would assume so, but I don't know that as a fact. I would assume so.
Okay, here we go.
Could you explain a little how the Board of Education deals with the incredible number of languages that walks through the doors every morning? What is it, 30 or 40 different languages that they have to handle? Or maybe even more.
Huh. This is the most unique set of questions I've had. It's good, you know, it's good to keep your brain going at this age and try to figure it out. I don't know exactly how they do it. I don't, but you are right. It's an amazing task to have to do it. Even the libraries, they have to handle so many different languages. I actually think it's one of the really beautiful things about Queens. Anything goes in Queens because it goes back to the religious tolerance theme as well. But there's so many different ethnicities, and you know, there's no real structured social hierarchy like in other places because there's like people moving so much and coming in, and we have amazing food. So, and I think people learn, you know, just living in Queens, to have tolerance for everybody because that's how we live there. I mean, we live with a multinational group all the time, and you go to the bodega, it's, you know, this person, the Romanian butcher. I have a Romanian butcher, and a Turkish bodega. It's like, it's amazing, and it's constant. So you don't see the antagonism. You just see these are the people you do your daily life with. I actually think it helps. But I don't know how they actually handle it in terms of the education department. I'm sure it's a huge challenge.
Laura, thank you. That was wonderful. I just wanted to comment. I met Jeff in 1981, and we worked on preservation in Queens for the New York Architectural Terracotta Company building at 42-10 Vernon Boulevard. It was slightly in one of your slides, which showed the Queensboro Bridge, since it was right next to the Queensboro Bridge. And I grew up in Queens in the Rockaways, so I found the book to be really interesting. And I congratulate you for continuing to promote the book. Buy it.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about Jeffrey's work in Queens? Susan's on the board of the Historic Districts Council and worked with Jeffrey for years.
Yeah, we worked together since the early 80s, and it was always wonderful to see Jeff's written comments. He was very thoughtful, and he was a terrific writer. So his letters, his editorials, his input to the Historic Districts Council, in whatever way necessary, was really valuable. And you know, it was a special opportunity to feel like Queens meant a lot. You know, I even saw Neponset, where I grew up, on one of your maps, number 5. So that was great. Thanks.
Right, well, there's quite a few hands going up, so I'll try and get as many questions as possible. So, sir?
Good thing I didn't go over with the talk.
In 2 sentences or less, explain the grid system in Queens.
When we first moved to Queens, I mean, I lived on the Upper West Side. I didn't even own a car. When we first moved to Queens, I had to drive to client meetings, and so I'm driving, and at one point I got lost. I mean, I just got lost. It was pre any way to look it up, right? So I called Jeffrey. I'm like, because he knew Queens like the back of his hand. I'm like, I'm lost. What do I do? He's like, Laura, get out of the car. I said, get out of the car. He's like, look up. I looked up, and there was the City Corps building, you know, in Lion City. It's not the City Corps building anymore. He's like, do you know where you are? I said, yes. But then I still have to explain to people what the numbers mean, and there's avenue, cohort. It's so confusing. It's so confusing. Manhattan's much easier still for me. You just look. We go one way or the other. But
I wanted to think that there's a borough personality, and so I wanted to ask, what's the most Queens-like interaction you have had in the development or the marketing of this book? Who's the most Queens person who's approached you, and what did they have to say?
oh, the Queens person. What is a Queens person?
I don't know. I'm leaving that question open.
To promote the book. I have to mull that one.
Maybe Mario Cuomo.
The response has been very positive, and it's really been interesting to hear people. Because everybody has a connection to Queens, it seems like, you know, especially when you're in my position, because they tell you about it, right? So I hear all these ways that people know Queens. And to me, that's been fascinating about these talks, because people come up and they're like, oh, my grandmother lived in Queens, or I lived right around the corner. I gave a talk at St. John's, and it was great. It was all these graduate students. They were history graduate students. They were so enthusiastic. It was wonderful. They asked all these questions. So the next day, I'm coming out of my office, and this guy comes up to me, he looks at me, you know, like I'm in a fishbowl in my office. He's staring at me. I'm bringing out the trash. He's staring at me. He's like, I saw you speak yesterday. He's like, it was great. You know, I live right around the corner. It happens all the time. It's really funny. It's a neighborhood. It's really interesting.
Hi, this has been wonderful. Can you explain how so many areas of Queens are so quiet that the cemeteries are sprinkled throughout them? The Calvary Cemetery, the cemeteries in Ridgewood, Springfield Gardens. Why was Queens such a popular place for cemeteries?
Because it was open land. I mean, they didn't think of it as, I don't think they thought of it as parks, which people do now. I mean, it is, it's lovely. But I think it was just inexpensive open land, and they made them the cemeteries. It's an amenity for us now, because you're right, they're quiet, and some of the architecture in them is very beautiful. But some people think of Queens as cemeteries too, you know. Airports and cemeteries. Hopefully we're dispelling that.
In reference to the subway system in Queens, was that created before these villages and areas were populated, or which came first? And is that covered in the book?
The development of the railroads and subways is detailed in depth in the book. It was around the turn of the century when it really started operating to make it more accessible, and that's why so many developments happened in that period, because you could get to them. I mean, there's an amazing picture of the 7 train, and there's nothing there, and the 7 train is just like going out. But once of course, all the development would happen originally adjacent to the subways. It's actually I mean, I feel fortunate where we plan to live near a subway, but it's actually challenging in Queens when you don't live near the mass transit. It's challenging. It's a very different lifestyle, because, I mean, I'm just emphasizing the importance of when they put the mass transit in, that's where development happened.
Hi, I'm wondering about development, I guess really it'd be across the city as opposed to just Queens, but and just in terms of preserving the character of, in so many neighborhoods in Queens these days, renovations have taken on a completely different character from the neighborhood. A lot of pink marble, if you've noticed. And I'm just wondering, you know, is there anything happening in city government or among the organizations represented here that is trying to do something about that?
Well, the Historic Districts Council tries to identify neighborhoods who want to be protected, and they work with them. We do surveys, we try to figure out, we have 6 to celebrate every year, which is neighborhoods that we feel are endangered, and that's to try to help that, but they have to have some historic character to begin with to do that. I always find it very disappointing in Queens when you see, I call it Queens crap, when you see the stuff going up that's so out of character. It just, it's sad. And it's very hard to stop because, you know, it's like this bizarre urge. I mean, it was started to happen in Sunnyside before we became a district. It was happening. That's why we were fighting so hard, because some people have this need to stand out with their house. They have this need to say, my house is bigger, my house has better materials. Somehow that reflects on them. I don't know why. It's just a house. You know, it's just where you live. And I'm an architect. I mean, I think it's important, but to make it, to try to make it not part of your community just seems odd to me, very odd. But I don't know how you could mandate people to feel differently. I just don't know how you can. You can try to instill it. You can try to show them how it could be, but usually it happens because a group of people have lived in the neighborhood and they start to see it changing and they don't want it to change. You have to have enough intact to make it work. And then they start to try to organize. And there are various groups in the city that try to help with that process. But I always think landmarks in Queens is still a little rugged, let's say. Because we don't have beautiful buildings. We have, you know, factories, and they're important historically. They're important historically, and we do have some beautiful buildings, but Queens is a little rougher. It doesn't mean it's not important. It's a part of the history of the city. So I think it's a slightly harder sell at the landmarks level, at the protection level.
Following up on your remark about cemeteries, I've read that hundreds of thousands of those interred currently in Queens were previously interred in Manhattan. Can you shed a little light or color on that process? Was it controversial? Was it made at high levels without consultation of the nearby residents?
I'm going to have to defer to my non-historical expertise here because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so my name is Claire. I grew up in Queens. I'm not really from here, but anyway, so I know the answer. So
oh, good, thank you.
I think I know the answer, you know, because I have patchy knowledge. So there was the 1847 Cemetery Relocation Act, where Manhattan, as you say, did want to get rid of, you know, detritus or laying around because they were trying to develop Manhattan and they knew how expensive the land here was. So they relocated it all out to what was then, you know, farms and countryside. Right. And it was cheap land. And, you know, of course there's like big tracts of cemeteries. The other thing culturally was that this was before parks were really built. And there were a lot of old people, sorry, I don't mean old, I meant poor people living in tenements who would pack up a picnic and go to visit their loved ones and spend a Sunday or so after church in the park. So those big, gigantic cemeteries provided, you know, quite a few different answers to different problems of the era.
Thank you, Claire. Just because it's close to, it's now 7, and I've got quite a few online questions, so I will just take, I know there's a gentleman over here whose hand I see up, and I'm sorry I've been sort of focused on one side of the room, but let me take this gentleman whose hand has been up. Okay.
The question I have is, if you address an envelope or mail, it's Brooklyn, New York, it's Bronx, it's Manhattan, but in Queens, it's Whitestone, New York, it's Jackson Heights, New York.
It's
now, I'm assuming that the reason is maybe because it was part of Nassau County, that it had towns names opposed to a borough name. Do you have an answer for that?
Well, it probably is that there were all these distinct towns, and that's how, and we held on to it. I mean, they keep trying to tell me I'm in Long Island City, and I'm like, no way, I'm in Sunnyside. It just pops up. I mean, we're very territorial, you know, we are in our neighborhoods.
Because
so.
I lived in Whitestone, and within minutes away is Malba, and another minute away is Beechhurst. And so it never made sense that it was so broken down to these small little towns, and there was all the same zip code.
It's a charming feature of Queens. What can I say?
Okay.
I think it gives it a more distinct sense of place because you're already in another subset. So you identify with it. It creates like a neighborhood. I think it's actually a lovely thing. Even if it's just the name, I think it does.
Okay, Laura.
Okay.
I'm going to take some online questions now, and if we don't, we'll do it. You mind if we do it quick fire? Just if
I'm here.
Okay, right. Not that I'm sure that, and for the in-person audience, obviously Laura will be here for some time, and will be able to answer many of your questions.
You need a mic.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I was saying, obviously, Laura will be here for some time and will be able to take questions. So I'm going to sort of go quickly through some of the online questions, and there's a lady over here.
And then I get to choose which one I answer. Is that it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can say, okay.
No. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Do you have any additional insight on history of what was originally known as Pips Park Playground in Sunnyside Gardens? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I know that one.
Okay.
The Phipps Park is right across from Phipps. It's a small park. It was very controversial. They sold the park right before we became a landmark district. When we became a district, it was actually given a curb cut, so people assumed that it would be developed. And there was a whole phase where Michael Schwarting, who is a professor of architecture, proposed putting the Illuminaire House there, which is this aluminum exhibition building that was disassembled from it was originally an exhibition building, but it was an architect had put it on an estate in Long Island. It had been disassembled, it had been reassembled in Central Islip at New York Institute of Technology, where I taught. Actually, I watched it going on. And out of the blue, Michael contacted me, and there's this empty lot, which is this park. And they tried to put it there. It was a big deal. It went to landmarks. It was very controversial. Even the people who didn't want our neighborhood landmarked wanted the landmarks to stop it, which is really funny to watch, actually. It was really funny. Anyway, they killed it. It didn't happen. But now, the owner has sold it to the city, and literally it's almost done. It's going to be a park. They restored one of the structures. They have children's area. So it's actually it's a happy ending for our neighborhood.
Right, and I believe it's been renamed in honor of Lieutenant Michael Davidson from the FDNY.
Correct.
Can you, now this could be the whole lecture, but could you give some more information about the evolution of Astoria?
The evolution of Astoria?
Yes.
Oh, no. I can't. I will say, no, it's not answering the question, but I will say Jeffrey lived in Astoria when I met him. And I had been to Queens maybe twice in my life at that point. It's kind of funny to think about it. And he loved Astoria. But Astoria is very popular with young people now. But Astoria, at the time we were looking to where to live, Astoria had a lot of one families that were being used as two families. So it was very expensive because they were two families, even though they weren't really two families. And also everyone was paving over their front yards. It was a cultural thing. They were paving over their front yards, and it was because they didn't want to deal with grass and touchy stuff. So the actual environment was getting very barren, in our opinion. I don't know if it doesn't really answer the development of Astoria, but that's my personal insight on Astoria. It has great restaurants.
Okay, terrific. Okay, quick questions, right? We're still in Astoria. As an architect, how would you describe the crenellated style of old stores along Broadway? Is there a... Don't worry.
No.
Okay.
No.
Right. Can you talk a little bit, again, briefly, about the Flushing remonstrance? Okay.
What?
Don't worry, Laura. We'll move on.
Well, I mean, that's a whole major idea.
Another potential lecture. Okay.
Okay, this will be the final.
Everybody just wants it to keep going.
I
I'm
know.
very flattered.
This will be the final online question.
Okay.
Yeah. Please let us know about Leafrack City. Okay. Right?
No.
That's fine. Okay. And now, okay.
I will give this audience the most unique set of questions award.
Okay, I've been attending these lectures for the past few years, and I've been to a number of them, and I'm noticing that there are so many more people here than at other ones. And I want to ask everyone, how many of you were raised in Queens or live in Queens and have a connection with Queens?
That is a very good question to conclude with, because this also means that I'm sure anyone who has lived in Queens would like to purchase a copy. Yes, and I think I could say that every single person here tonight knows someone in Queens who would love a copy of the book, right? Agreed? Yes. So, Laura, obviously, you had a very enthusiastic audience, and obviously there's so much to know about Queens. Who could possibly know everything? But your presentation was excellent. As I said to you earlier, I think Jeffrey would be so proud that his...
I want to sincerely thank everyone for coming. It's actually very joyous for me to see the reception to this book. I think it did really fill a hole in the history of New York City that had needed to be filled, and I felt very dedicated to making sure that happened, even under these circumstances. So I'm glad that it's happened, and it's been getting a very good response. So I appreciate everyone who's here to support the book. Thank you very much.
Hear, hear. Yeah. Victoria, would you like to say a few words?
The only thing I can add, Laura, is to say that, you know, what a wonderful tribute to your husband, and it's so heartfelt. And you said that he passed away in 2023, and it was unexpected. And what you did in just a couple of years' time with his work is incredible. That you quickly brought that to life, and such a great tribute to the man that you obviously love very much. So thank you so much for sharing him with us. Thank you. Thank you.
At another one of these events that HDC had, Eve Kahn was one of the conversationalists, and we prepped a little before, and I mean, I'm fine, but I said, don't do what she just did. You know, I don't want to get upset. Oh. It was earlier. I'm fine. So Eve wanted to say something like that. So in the middle of the talk, she says, I have to say, you know, I'm a writer, and my husband's a lawyer, and if I passed, he would never finish my book. I think it was a compliment.
So, Laura, in conclusion, we would make a little presentation to you, which would be the poster.
Oh,
as a little memento. And
I'll put it in my
yes,
window.
To express our huge appreciation for you sharing your knowledge and expertise. And after all, we have just found out so much more about the most diverse place on the planet. Thank you all for coming this evening. We look forward to seeing you again. Our next lecture will be celebrating the work of Albert Bard, Servant of Beauty, Landmark, Secret Love, and the unimagined life of an unsung New York hero. Please join us in 2 weeks on March 24th. Thank you again. And the in-person audience, when you're buying a book, please also have a glass of wine. Thank you so much.